Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'in lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. To proceed, this is the Ship of Salvation, and we are on our 51st lesson in Safinatun Najah, and we have reached section 10 on menstruation, in Arabic, al-hayd. The author and translation say, and this is section 10a, and actually first let us define menstruation. So menstruation in Arabic means as-saylan or as-sayalan, which means to flow. And in the Sharia, a simple definition, this is a definition of Shaykh ibn Hajar, shar'an al-hayd damu jabillatan yakhruju fi waqtin makhsus. Menstruation is natural bleeding at specific times. Menstruation, as defined by the Sharia, al-hayd, is natural bleeding at specific times. By these times, we determine that it is menstruation. If it happens outside of these specific times, which are defined in this section, it is not menstruation, it is something else. And basically, women will see three types of bleeding. They will see menstruation, they will see postnatal bleeding. Both of these are defined here. And then they will see abnormal bleeding, which will have various names. It might be called al-istihada, it might be called dam fasid, and so on. But basically there are just three, even though the third of them will have various names, but it all fits into the category of what is excluded from being menstruation and postnatal bleeding by not fitting those specific definitions, and in the case of menstruation, by not fitting those times that menstruation must fall into. First of all, we will go back to a time that was referenced in the early chapters of this book, and that is the time in which a young woman may see menstrual bleeding, and that is above the age of 9 lunar years approximately. So a girl who begins to see bleeding after 9 lunar years approximately, if that bleeding fits these other times, we rule that as menstruation. If she sees bleeding prior to 9 lunar years approximately, we do not rule it as menstruation. We rule it as abnormal bleeding. Another point, what do we mean by bleeding? We mean that, for example, if a woman were to insert a cotton ball into herself, that it would have color on it. One of the colors of menstrual bleeding, and those are all the way down to the color yellow, prior to her natural color, from deep red that the jurists call black, all the way down to yellow. All of those are colors of menstruation, all the way down to yellow being the last color before her natural bleeding. And women know these. So he says the minimum menstrual period is 24 hours, meaning a full day and night where continuously she sees bleeding, right? Meaning there's color there. Continuously for 24 hours, that is the minimum menstruation. If she sees bleeding, she sees color for less than 24 hours, it is not menstruation. It is abnormal bleeding. He continues, while 6 or 7 days is the norm. And the maximum legal period is 15 days, including the nights. So there's a point here. If she sees 24 hours of bleeding, as long as that doesn't spread beyond 15 days, even if she's not seeing color constantly, the whole period is ruled menstruation. So she sees 24 hours all at once, that's ruled menstruation. If she sees a few hours a day for a period of days, and all of them can be combined within 15 days to add up to 24 hours, all of those days, even the times when there are gaps between bleeding, are ruled menstruation. So 24 hours of bleeding within 15 days, whether it's all continuous or whether it's sporadic, all of those days are ruled menstruation. Any bleeding that goes beyond 15 days, right? So she's seeing color from the first day she begins to see color, even if it starts and stops, and that color lasts to beyond 15 days, that is a case of abnormal bleeding. And that's that much we know. Which portion of it is ruled abnormal bleeding and which portion of it is ruled menstruation, that is beyond our scope in this course. But she should ask someone who is specialized, who knows the rulings of abnormal bleeding, and they can help her decipher that. Once it goes beyond 15 days, that is a case of abnormal bleeding. La ilaha illallah. So that is the minimum, maximum, and normal menstrual cycle. So the 2 points from this section that help us derive a ruling are: bleeding must be above the minimum and below the maximum. What's below the minimum or beyond the maximum of 15 days is abnormal. It's gone outside of the specific times of menstruation. He continues and he says the minimum purity cycle between 2 menses is 15 days. So that means if she menstruates and then it stops, let's say it stops for 13 days and then comes back, and those days can't be combined with the first. Like she bled 6 days, stopped for 13, and then it comes back. That is a case of insufficient purity, and that first bleeding is not considered menstruation because she has been pure for less than 15 days between the 2 times she saw blood. It's less than the minimum purity, and that is the third time period we need. Menstruation must occur after at least a minimum purity. It must last long, so that's one. Has to occur after at least a minimum purity. Has to last 24 hours, whether those are all together or spread out. It can't go beyond 15 days. And that doesn't matter if the blood is all connected or disconnected. We can't see color on and off or continuously for beyond 15 days. La ilaha illallah. So those are minimum and maximum menstrual bleeding times and minimum purity between 2 menstruations. He also says the norm is 23 or 24 days, and women will differ with respect to their cycles, and many might have a cycle that is 28 days. That is not an unusual cycle. That's a very typical cycle. And then he also says, whilst the maximum legal period of purity has no defined limit, a woman might stop menstruating. It's just pure all the time, no problem. Whenever it comes back, it's menstruation, if it fits the conditions of menstruation. So that is menstruation. Then he says the minimum postnatal bleeding period is momentary. First of all, what is postnatal bleeding? How do we define postnatal bleeding? Postnatal bleeding is bleeding immediately after a fetus leaves the womb. So after a woman has given birth or a child has come out of her womb, even by miscarriage, and bleeding occurs immediately after that. It could just be for a moment, and that is considered postnatal bleeding. 40 days is the norm, and the maximum legal period is 60 days. So if it goes beyond 60 days, we have a case of abnormal bleeding. That much we know. Then you're going to have to refer to a specialist who knows the rulings of abnormal bleeding, and they will help us decipher what portion of the bleeding, the color, meaning the color she's seeing, is ruled is ruled postnatal bleeding. What portion of it is ruled abnormal bleeding, and then at a certain point, we will begin to rule it as menstruation. Those rulings are determined by knowledge of abnormal bleeding cases, and that is beyond our scope. But this much will help us determine when we are having normal menstruation and normal postnatal bleeding, and when we are having abnormal bleeding. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alayhi wa sallam walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.